Our teacher refused to let us evacuate when raw sewage started flooding our classroom because she thought her rival called in a fake emergency to sabotage her promotion. I was in Miss Yellow's Algebra 2 class when the announcement crackled over the PA. Attention all students and staff. Main sewage line has ruptured. Evacuate the building immediately. Everyone started moving automatically, but Miss Yellow stepped in front of the door. Sit back down, now. Her voice had that edge that meant detention. I didn't authorize any evacuation today. I raised my hand out of habit. But Miss Yellow, they said toxic methane. Sit down, or you're all getting zeros on tomorrow's test. Then she launched into her whole speech about soft modern students. The one about discipline and how her generation didn't panic over every little plumbing issue. Nobody wanted to risk their grade over what was probably just another false alarm. So we sat back down, but that's when I smelled it, like rotten eggs mixed with death. Miss Yellow? Jack raised his hand. It smells really bad in here. Success often requires enduring temporary discomfort, Jack. It's character building, something your generation knows nothing about. Then I saw it. Brown water seeping under the door, enough to darken the tiles. Everyone's phones started buzzing at once. My sister Alyssa was in biology 3 classrooms over. Her text made my blood go cold. We're all in parking lot with people in hazmat suits. Where are you? I showed Miss Yellow. My sister says everyone's evacuating. There's hazmat. Of course there is. I'm sure Miss Zelaya called them herself. Her eye twitched. She knows the board decides next week about whether or not I finally get promoted. She's always been out to get me. The water wasn't just seeping anymore. It was flowing. Black-brown sludge that was way too thick to just be water. Layla in the front row gagged. The methane smell was like breathing poison. Can we open a window at least? Ben asked, already standing on his chair, and let Miss Zelaya see us panicking? That's exactly what she wants. That's when something beautiful happened. The entire class started working together. The popular kids, the nerds, the athletes, all lifting our MacBooks and Jordan 1s as high as we could from the ground. The PA crackled again. Attention! Evacuate immediately. This is not a drill. Evacuate. Miss Yellow yanked the speaker wire from the wall. Modern leadership means staying calm when others panic. The sewage was ankle deep now. Warm. It was warm. I wanted to throw up. This isn't just sewage, Priya said, her voice shaking. My dad works for the city. Sewage lines run right next to the old gas mains. Your father isn't a chemistry teacher, is he? Miss Yellow stood up, blocking the door. I've been teaching for 30 years. I think I know the difference between dangerous and inconvenient. The water was at our ankles now. Black, chunky. The smell made my eyes water. Please, Layla begged. We could get really sick. The only thing making you sick is your hypochondria. When I was your age, we had open sewers and nobody complained. Then Kevin started coughing. Not regular coughing, deep hacking coughs that wouldn't stop. His face was turning red. He has asthma, someone yelled. Convenient, Miss Yellow sneered. The sewage was knee deep now, backing up faster than it could drain. Toilet paper and worse floating past our legs. 3 kids were throwing up. The smell, the gas, the fear, all of it hitting at once. Miss Yellow, I tried one more time. People could die. The only thing dying is my patience. That's when the ceiling tile fell. It splashed into the sewage, and the hole it left behind started dripping. Not water. Everyone screamed. I tried to move, but the sludge was tougher than I thought. My foot caught on something, maybe a backpack, and I went down, hard. I still remember the feeling of black water filling my mouth, chunks of human waste and toilet paper. I screamed underwater, sewage flooding my throat. The lights flicked back on. My face burned from whatever chemicals were in the water. 3 girls were pulling me up, trying to help me breathe. You're insane, Layla screamed. We're drowning. She's not breathing right. Then Tom yelled what we were all thinking. One spark from these electronics and we're dead. Methane explodes. I didn't think. I just grabbed my chair and swung it at the window. Crash. The fresh air felt like heaven. You just cost me my promotion, Miss Yellow shrieked. This is exactly what Zelaya wanted, but we weren't listening anymore. Everyone was scrambling for the window, passing my limp body hand to hand. Others were still holding their electronics up high, crawling through broken glass rather than dropping them in sewage. The hazmat team found Miss Yellow exactly where we left her, standing on her desk in chest-deep sewage, still insisting she had maintained perfect control. They revived me in the ambulance, 3 minutes without oxygen. The hazmat captain told reporters if we'd stayed 5 minutes longer, the methane levels would have caused severe neurological damage or death. But that wasn't even the worst part, because when the police officers got involved, she was let off the hook. She wasn't even fired. Apparently they couldn't prove the methane levels were actually dangerous since hazmat arrived too soon to test it, so the readings could have been inflated. But we all knew the truth. Miss Zelaya was known for getting the highest grades in the area, so the principal pulled some strings. That's when we knew us kids had to take matters into our own hands. The next thing I remember is waking up with this plastic mask pressed against my face and everything smelling like rubbing alcohol instead of sewage. The paramedic kept checking my eyes with a flashlight and telling me how lucky I was, while my throat felt like I'd swallowed broken glass mixed with acid. They had me strapped to this gurney thing, and I could see the school getting smaller through the back windows of the ambulance. My whole body was shaking even though they'd wrapped me in these silver blankets that crinkled every time I moved. The 4th needle in my arm hurt way less than my throat did. At the hospital, they wheeled me into this room with machines everywhere, and nurses kept coming in to take blood and check my oxygen levels. Alyssa showed up maybe 20 minutes later with our mom, and she just sat there crying and saying sorry over and over. She showed me her phone with all these texts from 11:47 a.m. telling her to get out immediately, and then more at 11:52 saying hazmat was there. I grabbed my phone and scrolled back to see when Miss Yellow had blocked the door, and it was 12:08 p.m., 21 minutes after everyone else got out safe. The doctor came in with this clipboard and started asking about what I'd swallowed and for how long I was underwater. They gave me this nasty charcoal drink that was supposed to help with the toxins, and hooked me up to more machines to monitor my breathing. That night when we finally got home, our class group chat was going absolutely crazy with everyone posting pictures of their symptoms. Jack had these red welts all over his legs. Layla's eyes were so bloodshot she looked like something from a horror movie. Ben posted that his mom had to take him back to urgent care because he couldn't stop throwing up. Kevin was still at the hospital on breathing treatments, and his mom said the doctors were keeping him overnight. Everyone kept saying the same thing about how we were too scared of our grades to stand up to Miss Yellow. The anger was building with every new message and photo. People were posting screenshots of their medical paperwork and comparing whose symptoms were worse. The next morning, I woke up to my mom showing me her phone with this email from the district. They called it a minor plumbing disruption and actually praised the swift response of staff and emergency services. My hands literally shook as I took screenshots of every single lie in that email. They said all students were safely evacuated within minutes. They said no students required medical attention beyond standard precautionary measures. They said Miss Yellow had followed all proper protocols. I posted the screenshots to our group chat, and within seconds everyone was losing their minds about the lies. That's when I got a DM from someone named Nia Rosen, who said she wrote for the school paper. She asked if I'd be willing to go on record about what really happened in that classroom. She said she'd been tracking safety violations at our school for months, and this was by far the worst incident yet. I told her yes immediately, and she sent me a list of questions to answer with as much detail as I could remember. While I was typing my answers, our whole class started putting together a shared Google Drive folder. People uploaded videos they'd taken of the sewage flooding in. Someone had recorded Miss Yellow yanking the PA speaker from the wall. There were screenshots of text messages with timestamps proving when we were trapped versus when everyone else evacuated. By that evening, we had over 50 files of evidence showing exactly what happened. The folder kept growing as more people remembered things they'd captured on their phones. I decided to call the hazmat office to try getting the official methane readings from when they arrived. The person who answered put me on hold 3 times before finally saying they couldn't comment during an ongoing investigation. That's when it really hit me how hard this fight was going to be. They were already circling the wagons to protect themselves. 2 days later, this guy named Jamal Rucker messaged me after seeing a draft of Nia's article that she'd shared online. He worked for some environmental justice nonprofit and said he could help us file public records requests to get the real data. He sent over all these template forms with specific legal language that would make it harder for them to refuse or delay. We spent the whole weekend filling out formal requests to the city, the school district, and the fire department for any records about the sewage incident. There's something really odd about Miss Yellow keeping them trapped while hazmat teams are already outside helping other classes. Makes me wonder what kind of history she has with Miss Zelaya that would make her risk students' lives just to avoid looking bad. Jamal taught us to ask for emails, memos, inspection reports, maintenance logs, everything. We submitted 12 different records requests using the proper legal channels he showed us. Then on Monday, my chemistry teacher asked me to stay after class. She closed the door and told me I needed to stop stirring up drama before finals. She said Miss Yellow was keeping a list of every student who was speaking out publicly. She actually used the word list, like we were living in some kind of dictatorship. That night I got home and went straight to the shower to wash off the smell that was still stuck in my hair. The hot water hit my face and suddenly I couldn't breathe. My chest got tight and the water running down my face felt exactly like when I went under in that classroom. I started gasping and choking, my hands clawing at the shower curtain. The bathroom walls felt like they were closing in. I dropped to my knees in the tub, water still pouring down, and I was drowning all over again. Black chunks in my mouth, sewage filling my throat. Can't breathe, can't breathe. Alyssa must have heard me screaming because she burst through the door and yanked the curtain back. She turned off the water and grabbed a towel, wrapping it around me while I sat there shaking. She kept telling me to breathe in for 4 counts, hold for 4, out for 4, over and over for 20 minutes until my heart stopped racing and I could see straight again. The next morning, our parents sat us down in the living room with serious faces. Dad had already called 3 different lawyers who all said the same thing about handling this quietly through proper channels. Mom kept saying we needed to think about our college applications and how this could affect our futures. They wanted us to let the adults handle everything behind closed doors without making waves. I tried explaining that kids almost died, but Dad cut me off saying the lawyers would take care of it professionally. Alyssa backed me up, saying student safety was more important than avoiding controversy. Mom got upset and said we didn't understand how these things worked in the real world. We went back and forth for an hour until they finally said we could do what we wanted, but they wouldn't support any public protests or media involvement. That afternoon, I was checking my email when this message popped up from an address that was just random numbers and letters. The subject line said, "Thought you should see this," and attached were these maintenance logs from the district. My hands started shaking as I read through them. The main sewage line had been showing stress warnings for 3 whole months. There were work orders marked pending and low priority dating back to September. Someone inside the district building wanted us to know the truth. I forwarded everything to our Google Drive and texted the group chat immediately. Within minutes, everyone was freaking out because this proved they knew something could happen and did nothing about it. Naya worked all weekend turning our evidence into an article for the school paper. She was super careful with her words, sticking to facts and quotes from students who were there. Monday morning, her piece went live on the paper's website with the headline, "Students Trapped During Sewage Emergency Seek Answers." By lunch, the principal had called her into his office. She texted us from outside his door that he was demanding a full retraction or he'd cut the paper's funding for the rest of the year. She refused to take it down, and he told her she had 24 hours to reconsider. The whole journalism class was panicking because without funding, they couldn't print anything. Tuesday morning, I finally got my lab results back from the clinic visit right after the incident. The doctor pointed at these numbers on the chart showing elevated methane exposure markers in my blood. She said it wasn't definitive proof of dangerous levels, but it was consistent with what we'd expect from methane poisoning. She told me I was lucky I didn't have permanent lung damage, and that a few more minutes could have caused serious problems. I scanned the results and added them to our evidence folder. That's when this guy, Devin Ruby, reached out through email saying he was a city attorney who'd heard about our situation. He offered to help us understand our rights during his off hours, completely free. We met him at the library Wednesday evening, and he walked us through how to file formal safety complaints with the right agencies. He showed us which forms to use and what language would get taken seriously. He couldn't officially represent us, but he gave us all the tools we needed to fight this ourselves. We spent the entire weekend filling out complaints for the state education department and the public health board. Each agency needed different evidence and different forms. Priya's dad helped us organize everything into separate packets with cover letters. We made copies of everything and sent them certified mail, so they couldn't claim they never got them. By Monday, the whole school was buzzing because someone had overheard Miss Yellow in the teacher's lounge calling us attention-seeking liars who were trying to ruin her career. She was telling other teachers that we were exaggerating everything for attention. The words hurt, but they also made us more determined to prove we were telling the truth. People who weren't even in our class started coming up to us in the hallway saying they believed us and sharing their own stories about Miss Yellow ignoring safety stuff. Tuesday during study hall, about 30 of us decided to organize a quiet sit-out. We sat in the hallway instead of going into classrooms that didn't have updated safety protocols. We didn't make signs or chant or anything, just sat there with our books doing homework on the floor. Other kids watched nervously from their classrooms while teachers kept asking us to come inside. The principal showed up and said we were disrupting education, but we stayed put for the whole period. Finally, after 2 weeks of waiting, our records request came through. The district had tried to black out a bunch of stuff, but we could still read most of the emails. There it was in writing. Maintenance supervisors discussing how the sewage line problems were marked low priority despite known risks. One email literally said, "It can wait until summer when students aren't here." We had proof the district knew and did nothing. The next morning, district lawyers sent out a press release to every local news outlet saying our evidence was being taken out of context and didn't show the full safety measures they had in place. They attached a bunch of technical documents nobody could understand, trying to make us look like we were overreacting teenagers who didn't know what we were talking about. My phone started blowing up with texts from classmates saying their parents were starting to doubt our story because the lawyers made it sound so official and reasonable. We decided to fight back by organizing a listening circle in the school parking lot after classes where everyone could share what they went through and what symptoms they were still dealing with. About 40 kids showed up and we sat in a big circle on the asphalt while people took turns talking about their burning throats and headaches and how scared they still felt. Kevin's mom came too, and when she heard him talk about needing his inhaler 3 times a day now instead of once a week, she started crying and showed us the receipts for his medicine, which added up to over $300 just for the past 2 weeks. Someone recorded the whole thing on their phone, and that night Kevin's family posted the medical bills online with a simple message about how one teacher's bad choice was costing them their grocery money. Within an hour, people started sharing it everywhere, and someone set up a GoFundMe that hit $2,000 by the next morning with donations from parents and teachers and even strangers who heard about what happened. The community support made us feel less alone, but we knew we needed more than sympathy to make real change happen. That's when an anonymous email showed up in Nia's inbox with security camera footage attached, showing our classroom from that day with timestamps and everything. You could see the exact moment the sewage started coming under the door at 10:47 a.m. and how it kept rising while we were trapped inside until 11:23 a.m. when we finally broke the window. The video was horrible to watch, but it proved everything we'd been saying about how long we were stuck in there with the toxic water rising around us. We posted it everywhere, and within hours it had thousands of views and angry comments from parents demanding answers from the school board. Then the teachers union rep sent us all a group message saying we shouldn't be trying to destroy Miss Yellow's career and that we needed to focus on the bigger problem of systemic safety failures instead of making one teacher the villain. It made me think about how the whole system was broken if teachers felt like they had to choose between evacuating kids and keeping their jobs. I decided to reach out to Miss Zelaya directly to see if she could help us understand what was really going on behind the scenes. She agreed to meet me at a coffee shop downtown, and when I got there, she looked tired and stressed like she hadn't been sleeping well. She admitted the rivalry with Miss Yellow was real, but said it wasn't personal. It was about a broken promotion system that made teachers compete against each other for a single spot every year. She explained how the district pitted them against each other by comparing test scores and attendance rates, and how Miss Yellow probably panicked about the evacuation hurting her numbers right before the promotion decision. She urged us to focus on fixing the evacuation training and protocols instead of just going after one teacher because the real problem was nobody knew what to do in emergencies. Miss Yellow calling them liars in the teacher's lounge while they have actual medical records showing methane in their blood? That's quite the contrast right there. Hard evidence versus angry words behind closed doors. Her words stuck with me as we started preparing for the school board meeting where we'd finally get to present our case officially. We spent 2 whole days after school rehearsing our testimony and cutting our statements down to exactly 2 minutes each because that's all the time they were giving us. We picked Layla to talk about the health impacts, Kevin to discuss the financial burden on families, and me to present the evidence about the district knowing about the problems ahead of time. We practiced over and over until we could say everything we needed to without going even 1 second over the time limit. The night before the big meeting, Alyssa knocked on my bedroom door, and when I let her in, she just started sobbing about how she froze when her class evacuated and didn't even think to warn me until it was too late. She kept saying she was a terrible sister and she'd never forgive herself for being safe while I almost died, and we held each other crying for what felt like hours. I told her it wasn't her fault and that I was just glad she was okay, but I could tell she was still carrying all this guilt about not doing more to help. The next morning, we all dressed up in our best clothes and walked into that board meeting room with our folders of evidence and our practice speeches ready to go. But right away, they announced they were running behind schedule and cut our speaking time in half to just 1 minute each, which meant we had to throw out half of what we planned to say. We each rushed through our main points while the board members looked at their phones and shuffled papers like they weren't even listening to us describe almost dying in their school. The local news cameras were there though, and they caught everything, including the board president checking his watch while Kevin talked about his medical bills. The segment that aired that night made me want to scream because they framed the whole thing as students having drama with a veteran teacher instead of focusing on how the district were ignored safety warnings and nearly killed us. The reporter spent more time talking about Miss Yellow's 30 years of service than about the methane levels or the sewage flooding or any of the actual dangers we faced. That same night, my phone started buzzing with messages from blocked numbers telling me to drop this whole thing or face consequences. The texts came in waves. First, just vague warnings about ruining my future, then getting more specific about how colleges would see me as a troublemaker. I screenshotted everything and showed my parents, who immediately drove me to the police station to file a report. The officer behind the desk typed up our complaint while looking bored and told us they'd investigate, but we all knew nothing would come of it. Kevin got the same messages, and so did Layla, and when we compared them in our group chat, they all used similar wording, which made us think it was one person trying to scare all of us. The next day, my chemistry teacher pulled me aside after class and handed me a small device that looked like a calculator. She explained it was a carbon dioxide meter her husband used for HVAC work, and suggested we might want to check the air quality in different classrooms. We spent lunch walking through the building, taking readings, and the numbers in the older wing were way higher than they should be according to the instructions on the device. The science rooms had the worst readings, and when we checked the vents, we could see years of dust and grime clogging them up. We documented everything with photos and added it to our evidence folder, which was getting huge. Jamal called me that afternoon to explain how to file an appeal for the documents the district sent us with half the pages blacked out. out. He walked me through writing a formal letter citing specific public records laws and explaining why their redactions weren't legally justified. We sent it certified mail and made copies for our records because Jamal said having a paper trail was crucial for these kinds of fights. 3 days later, the principal's secretary called me out of English class, and when I got to the office, he was sitting there with this big fake smile. He started talking about how impressed he was with my leadership during the crisis, and how the school needed students like me in official positions. Then he offered me a spot on the student council executive board with a special focus on safety initiatives if I would just help calm things down and work within the system. I recognized the bribe immediately and politely told him I'd think about it, but we both knew I wasn't taking it. That afternoon, Nia texted me that her source at the fire department finally agreed to talk off the record. We met the hazmat captain at a coffee shop 3 towns over where nobody would recognize us. He looked around nervously before telling us the methane readings in our classroom were at 18% and 20% is when things can explode. He said we were literally minutes away from a potential disaster, but he couldn't go on record because of department politics and ongoing investigations. We couldn't publish what he said, but at least now we knew exactly how close we'd come to dying. Back at the school, we started working on a timeline using all the complaints students had filed over the past year. Kids remembered smelling weird odors in different rooms and getting headaches during certain classes. We plotted everything on a big poster board with dates and locations, and a clear pattern emerged showing problems in the same areas over and over. The timeline showed the district had been getting complaints for at least 6 months before our incident, which proved they knew something was wrong. We took photos of our timeline and posted it on social media where it started getting shared hundreds of times. 2 days later, I got an official-looking envelope in the mail that made my hands shake as I opened it. The district's lawyer had written that Miss Yellow was filing a defamation complaint against any students who had made public statements about her actions during the evacuation. The letter said we could be held liable for damages to her reputation and career prospects. My stomach dropped reading all the legal language and threats about lawsuits and financial penalties. My parents immediately called Devin, who said he'd come with me to any meetings about this complaint. When we showed up at the district office the next week with Devin in his suit carrying a briefcase, their whole attitude changed. Instead of trying to intimidate me, they suddenly wanted to discuss the situation calmly and find a mutually beneficial resolution. Devin kept citing case law about protected speech and the public's right to know about safety issues in schools. He insisted that students had due process rights and couldn't be silenced for sharing their experiences of a traumatic event. The district lawyer kept trying to argue, but Devin had an answer for everything, and you could see them getting frustrated. Meanwhile, our parents had started a Facebook group to organize and share information, but within 2 days it turned into a mess. Half the parents wanted to sue immediately, while others thought we should work with the administration. Some parents blamed the teachers' union, while others said this was all about budget cuts. People started arguing in the comments and taking screenshots to share in other groups. We had to spend hours doing damage control and trying to keep everyone focused on the actual safety issues instead of fighting each other. Then one of the quieter parents messaged me privately saying she had something important to share. She came to our house that evening with a folder and pulled out an insurance document her brother had given her. He worked for the company that insured the school district, and this report used the exact phrase negligent delay in evacuation when describing our incident. The document also mentioned previous claims related to air quality and maintenance issues that had been settled quietly. We spent the whole night at Jack's house arguing about whether we should share the insurance report online. Kevin kept saying we had to black out all the names and policy numbers first, while Priya worried the insurance company would sue us. Ben grabbed a Sharpie and started marking through anything that looked personal on the copies we'd made. Tom helped him scan each page after we'd covered up the private stuff. Layla posted it to our class Instagram at exactly midnight with screenshots of the key parts circled in red. Within an hour, it had 300 shares and climbing. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing with notifications from people tagging the school board members in comments. We decided to put together everything we'd collected into one big folder online with all our videos and documents and testimonies from everyone in the class. Jack stayed up editing while I wrote captions explaining what each piece of evidence showed. Priya organized everything by date and added timestamps to match up different pieces. We made sure our actual experiences were the main focus, not just the legal papers, because we didn't want adults turning this into some boring policy debate when we'd almost died. The folder went live Sunday morning, and by noon, local news stations were calling my house asking for interviews. Monday morning, the district sent out an email announcing a safety town hall for Thursday night where they'd address community concerns about recent incidents. We knew this was them trying to control the story, so we started making a plan. Everyone got assigned different topics to bring up, and we practiced keeping our points under 2 minutes each. Thursday came fast, and the auditorium was packed with parents and reporters and school officials all crammed together. Miss Yellow stood up when they opened the mic for comments, and her voice shook as she talked about the pressure from the administration to keep test scores high. Why does Miss Yellow suddenly want to talk about test score pressure when she's been threatening legal action against these kids? Her shaking voice at the meeting seems really different from sending defamation complaints through lawyers just days before, and how they'd threatened to pass her over for promotion again if she had any disruptions in her class. She said the system made teachers choose between student safety and keeping their jobs, and she'd made the wrong choice because she was scared of losing everything she'd worked 30 years for. Part of me felt bad for her even though she'd almost killed us all. The board president announced they were bringing in some outside company to review everything, but said it would take 6 months to get their report. Parents started yelling about needing changes now, not next year. Friday afternoon, I found a thick envelope in my mailbox from the school district, and my hands got sweaty opening it. The letter said I was getting formal discipline for destruction of school property and insubordination during the evacuation, along with everyone else who'd gone through the window. They wanted us to pay for the window replacement and serve 20 hours of detention. My mom grabbed the letter and ripped it in half, saying they could try to collect from her dead body. At the school Monday, some kids who weren't in our class started giving us dirty looks because the spring carnival got canceled due to the controversy. One girl said we'd ruined everything for everyone just to get attention. The group chat that had been so united started having arguments about whether we'd gone too far. Tuesday after school, I walked past the algebra classroom for the first time since it happened and stopped in the doorway. The smell of cleaning chemicals was strong, but underneath I could still smell that rotten egg stench, or maybe I was imagining it. My throat started closing up and I couldn't breathe right, and suddenly I was back underwater with sewage sewage filling my lungs. I ran to the bathroom and threw up, then sat on the floor shaking for 10 minutes. But sitting there, I realized getting revenge on Miss Yellow wouldn't fix anything, because the whole system was broken. Wednesday, the district lawyer called another meeting and offered to drop all the discipline stuff if we signed papers saying we wouldn't talk bad about the school anymore. Devin looked at the papers and shook his head, telling us these agreements would basically make it illegal for us to warn other students about safety problems. We all refused to sign even though it meant keeping the punishment on our records. That night, we had a video call planning a walkout for the following Monday, with a list of demands including gas detectors in every classroom and new evacuation protocols and mandatory safety training for all staff. Parents volunteered to stand outside as observers, so the school couldn't claim we were truant. Everyone started making signs and picking team leaders for different groups. The energy felt good again, like we were actually doing something instead of just complaining. Monday morning came fast, and by 7:30, over 200 kids were standing in the parking lot holding signs we'd made all weekend. Parents lined the edges with coffee cups and phones recording everything while teachers watched from classroom windows. We'd printed our demands on bright yellow paper and taped them everywhere. Gas detectors in every room, new evacuation rules, and real safety training for all staff. The principal came out with his megaphone telling everyone to get to class, but nobody moved. Nia was live streaming the whole thing on the school paper's Instagram, and within minutes we had thousands of viewers. Jamal had coached us to stay completely silent and peaceful, just holding our signs and letting the visual speak for itself. After an hour, the local news vans pulled up, and suddenly the principal's tone changed completely. He invited 3 of us inside to discuss our concerns while everyone else stayed put. We presented our packet of evidence and demands, keeping everything professional like Devin had taught us. The meeting lasted 2 hours, and when we came out, the principal announced they'd schedule an emergency board meeting for Thursday. The crowd stayed another hour to make sure he couldn't back out, then everyone went home. Tuesday's newspaper ran our story on the front page with a headline focusing on student safety proposals instead of drama. Nia and Jamal had worked with the reporter for hours, making sure the facts stayed centered. Wednesday, the independent review company released their preliminary findings, and it was worse than we thought. They found 17 different safety violations, including the missing gas detectors, and no evacuation training for 6 years. The report specifically mentioned Miss Yellow's actions as an example of systemic failure in emergency response. Thursday's board meeting was packed with parents, students, and reporters filling every seat and lining the walls. The board members looked uncomfortable as they read through the review findings out loud. When they called for the vote on new safety measures, every single hand went up. They approved gas sensors for all classrooms, monthly evacuation drills, and mandatory crisis training for every staff member. Miss Yellow got reassigned to administrative duties pending completion of remedial safety courses. The principal received an official reprimand that would stay in his file permanently. Friday morning, we got letters saying the district would cover all medical expenses from the incident. Kevin's family cried when they saw the inhaler costs would be reimbursed completely. The district also announced a new student safety committee with actual voting power on policy changes. My first therapy appointment was the following Tuesday, and the counselor specialized in trauma from near-death experiences. She had me practice breathing exercises and talked about how my body was still in survival mode. We worked on recognizing triggers and building coping strategies for when memories came flooding back. 2 weeks later, board member Naomi Renfro invited 5 of us to her office downtown. She wanted to create permanent student positions on all safety committees with real authority to stop dangerous situations. We spent 3 hours drafting the proposal that would give students the power to call for evacuations if teachers refused. The proposal passed unanimously at the next board meeting, with even Miss Yellow's supporters voting yes. Therapy was helping more than I expected, and after 6 weeks, I could shower without panicking. The counselor taught me grounding techniques for when I smelled anything that reminded me of that day. Alyssa came to a few sessions with me to work through her guilt about evacuating while I was trapped. 3 months after the incident, I had to pick up a book from the math hallway. My feet slowed as I got closer to that classroom door, but I made myself keep walking. The room had new tiles, fresh paint, and a bright yellow gas detector mounted on the wall. I stood in the doorway for a full minute, just breathing normally and feeling okay. My phone buzzed with Alyssa asking if I wanted to get tacos after school, and I texted back yes, with a smiley face. Walking back down the hallway, I passed other kids going to class like normal without knowing what happened there. The new safety posters on every wall showed proper evacuation routes and emergency procedures in big, bold letters. Some kids complained about the monthly drills, but I was grateful every single time we practiced. My grades had dropped during everything, but teachers gave me extensions without asking questions. The other kids from our class had formed this weird, unspoken bond where we'd check on each other with just a look. Kevin's asthma was under control, and he'd become one of the strongest voices for air quality monitoring. Layla transferred schools but stayed in our group chat sending supportive messages. Tom started a petition for hazmat training for janitors that got 800 signatures. Ben's parents sued the district separately and donated their settlement to installing more safety equipment. Priya's dad got appointed to the infrastructure committee and pushed for complete pipe replacement. Jack organized fundraisers for other schools that couldn't afford gas detectors. Life kept moving forward, and things actually changed because we refused to stay quiet about what happened to us. Alright folks, that's all from me today. Thanks for letting me ramble and wonder about things with you. Really enjoyed exploring all this together. Catch you next time. If you made it to the end, drop a comment. I love reading all your comments.